Hey, fight fans, 86, what's going on? I want to come to you real quick. Just a little bit of history, a discussion, of course. So there was a question asked to why Joe Butler was considered the king of the middleweights. And also, if you haven't, be sure to check out the video on Joe Butler. The latest speaks to the Philadelphia fighter that was Joe Butler, born in Paoli, Pennsylvania. A lot of good information shared there. Very common name. Probably someone you had heard of or come across in some capacity in the past, but ultimately there wasn't a lot of information out there on him. So this was meant to kind of just highlight some of his sites. We know that nicknames can come in all different ways in the sport of boxing. There are varying means by which a nickname may or may not come about. So, in this case, one of the things that I shared via comment that I think is prevalent is the fact that Joe Butler was one of the contending middleweights of the time. This being the 1890s, where he applied the majority of his work, where he was probably at his best during the 1890s. And essentially, I think one of the things that made him stand out was the fact that he was a willing to take all comers type of fighter, a willing challenger to anyone, even those that were well above his weight class. And when you hear the moniker king of the middleweight thrown about, I think that's one of the things that made him stand out, and one of the reasons he was considered such. Always on call, always there at the beacon's call for a fight, regardless of who was with. And he was one of those individuals that, despite weighing primarily around the middleweight limit, would fight much for larger guys very often on a consistent basis, thus helping to push forward that nickname. And he was in Philadelphia, which is one of the premier fighting towns, as we know, still to this day. And that holds true. He was in with the likes of Joe Goddard, former Australian heavyweight champion, Frank Slavin, former Australian heavyweight champion, George Godfrey, former colored world heavyweight champion, Frank Charles, another former colored world heavyweight champion. This is to name a few. He was a guy that was consistently in with individuals who were well above his class, and that didn't stop him from making a stamp or his name in the sport. And that's what led him to become the fighter that he was. And that rings true for a lot of individuals from during those periods. They were used to fighting individuals that were much larger, and that didn't stop them from making a fight happen. Of course, Butler himself would reign as a colored world middleweight champion. He was the third ever, actually, and he was only able to have 2 defenses before losing it to Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Coolers. That being said, Butler was legitimate as far as a tough guy who could punch, and in addition, he is great on his feet and a bit quicker than what may have met the eye. So that's what a lot of people latched on to. So he was well regarded in the Pennsylvania area, and I think nationally as well, but certainly fighting in Philadelphia, where pretty much the bulk of competition came through during those eras, and he was able to stand out. So the record may not give you that feeling that, hey, this was a top level fighter, but in actuality, a lot of his losses came towards the back end of his career. And this was partly due to the fact that, as I mentioned, he would continue to take on fighters, challengers at all times, regardless of the size. The Peter Mars of the world. You ended up fighting him twice. And that just gives you a feel for it. So, king of the middleweights right there for sure. And a hell of a fighter. Thanks.